welcome again, guys, back to our podcast. This is the Blacks podcast. A for DJ, A for Anarchy, T for Charlie, and S for Sherika. With the recent events in the country with Hurricane Melissa, we will be going through the impacts on what that had on the country in regards to the economic as well as housing. But before we jump into the damage, let's first clear up a couple of things. What exactly do you guys see is hazard here?
Okay, so a hazard is a dangerous form of hurricane with strong winds, heavy rain, and storm surges. But here's the key point. Alright, a hazard comes before a disaster when it affects people, homes, and communities.
And one major hazard with Hurricane Melissa was flooding. When heavy rainfall caused water to cover land that's usually dry, streets, river, yards, ponds.
But hurricanes can also cause drought-like conditions. For example, after the Hurricane Melissa, people in the western parishes didn't have access to water as most of the place was flooded out and they didn't have access to any drinking water. So, yes.
Alright, so seeing that we've kind of covered the basics or the defining concepts of what comes a hurricane, let's now look into one of the most important parts when your home isn't safe. So we're going to go ahead to look into how persons have been affected in regards to housing and what is going on in regards to that as well. And how many persons have as well have been displaced because of this harm.
Okay, so after the start, about 28% of homes in the coastal and flood-prone areas were moderately and severely damaged. Over 15,000 Jamaicans had to leave their homes and stay in schools and community centers.
In places like St. Andrews, Portland, landslides, blocked roads, and collapsed buildings that didn't just stop traffic, it stopped food deliveries, emergency help, and access to hospitals.
So this wasn't just about broken buildings, it's pretty much about life for everyday life being restricted. Persons have to now find a new routine on where they're going to be staying, how they're going to be taking care of family members and so forth. Another big impact that the hurricane took from the country as well is agriculture. If there's no farm, then there's no food. So let's dive into the aspect of those as well.
So if you eat food, this part really affects you because after the hurricane, all of the agricultural products was affected, like the farming area aspects of it. The animals, the crops was all damaged. Everything was just went down.
Crop losses were estimated at 35 to 40%, especially bananas when it comes to agricultural crops. That's nearly half of the harvested crop. Sad.
Farmers lost animals, irrigation systems were damaged, and soil erosion made land unstable even after the storm.
Total agricultural damage over 20 billion Jamaican dollars. That meant more food imports and higher prices for everyone.
Alright, so considering that we just mentioned a high figure, we're going to go ahead to look into the impact. Money and means revenue, which means revenue or income for the country. Another big driver for revenue for the country is tourism. We are a tourism island, and as you can see with the magnitude of the damage, that means that persons are lost for a job, especially in the tourism area, primarily because of hotels being damaged and having to now close their doors. Because hotels have no closed, that means that there's no tourism coming in. So we also face that as well.
Hotel occupancy dropped by 55 to 60% in the month after the Melissa. Flights were disrupted, meeting and cruise ships stopped coming.
For craft vendors, taxi drivers, and other tour guides, that meant zero income overnight. No tourists, no sales.
This really shows how the climate really affect on the livelihood of not only the country but like outside in general. Like it affects everybody, not only just locally, regionally. It's also like an international problem. So the climate really took a toll on those things towards the of the hurricane.
Okay, all right, so those are all excellent points. So we know that Marissa did take some time to go ahead with, developing and making landfall. There were some moments where we thought that it was going to make direct landfall. However, eventually it did. No, Jamaica was not the only country on the path that was affected. We also have countries such as Haiti and Cuba for one and Ethiopia. Based on we were looking to see how they were affected as well.
Not all, Haiti, Jamaica, Cuba, all fell earthquake Venezuela, but in different ways.
In Haiti, the impact turned into a humanitarian crisis with severe flooding and displacement and food shortage.
In Cuba, a few lives were lost as their preparedness and their ability to evacuate as quickly as possible. Their main focus was on more like building back buildings than emergency aids.
So consider that the storm has, or the hurricane has passed rather, and we've looked at how it impacted Jamaica both economically and with housing. Jamaica is now back on the road to recovery to see how best we can make this back to normal. We're going to take a look at efforts in regards to the main focus in which are food and revenue to get Jamaica back to where it was before the start of landfall.
Okay, so the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA, launched a 2-year recovery plan giving farmers seeds, fertilizer equipment, and training to rebuild stronger.
Meanwhile, the nation housing stepped in with a 6-month mortgage paid, low interest on payment in place, grants up to 500,000 Jamaican dollars, and plans for housing.
Alright, so those are definitely excellent steps that the government is taking in regards to getting Jamaica back on track. I love the idea that they have a 6-month pause for mortgage. They're also having relief loans, as Talvia said, and seeds for farmers as well to get the agriculture back pumping and having revenue back to the island. However, while those are all excellent points, we still have to remember that hurricanes aren't going away.
Yes, and to prevent future risks, our economy needs to be more diversified so that we are not overly dependent on tourism, so that we can also expand and network and globalize in different areas.
But we also need a good infrastructure, homes, school and hospitals, and water systems built to withstand extreme weather.
Preparedness is optional anymore, it's survival.
Alright, I definitely agree with DJ there, but to wrap things up, Hurricane Melissa took homes, crops, and income, but it also gave us lessons as well. Lessons about resilience, planning, and protecting people before the profits. As we mentioned earlier, or as we were speaking earlier before the podcast, because when the storm speaks, we must listen. We have to understand that lives are more important than profits. And at the end of the day, even though we were trying to protect profits, we now have to rebuild that relation. My heart goes out to the persons who have lost their lives, and I'm hoping that everyone will be back to the first part. But thank you for watching the podcast. And that's it.
Never forget to hold your hand. No, we can feel like forever we've been struggling. Your love is our strength. Together we're resilient. No man can feel a woman's pain.